I'm JoanneOMara and I work at Deakin University. I'm a chief investigator on the Serious Play project and have been involved since the beginning of the project. My role has particularly been with the Victorian schools, so I'm the only chief investigator in Victoria, so I've been running the Victorian side of the project. And two of the schools that you've got in the video, I've been responsible for the work that they've done. Kew High School have been working with us actually since 2007, and the work that Danny and Frank have done at Kew is fantastic. We've been so amazed at the ways in which they've really integrated video games into their curriculum. And you can see from the work, the video game work has encompassed a lot of areas of the curriculum. And they've also managed to find ways of doing a balance between critiquing games and giving kids opportunities to rank games and to think about how good a game is, and also to critique the values in a game, and to speak back to some of the sorts of things which are said about video games in the news. So video games always lead to violence. There's a lot of moral panics around video games. And so a lot of the work at Kew has been to think about what is the place of video games in our society. And I've been so impressed with all the work that these students have done. It's been amazing. And of course the work with Frank and Danny over this long period of time. At Fitzroy North, Con has done the most amazing work with his students. They're middle years primary students, so grade 3, 4, and they've produced the most astounding video games. They're fantastic. And one of the things we've noticed across the project is the way that Con has really developed his practice. So in the first year, he experimented with how to run the games, and each of the little groups that was making a game, they set up their own little team, and it was like a lab. And so everyone had little roles in it. And it worked really well, but there were a lot of disputes between each of the companies. And so Con had to find ways of resolving that. So in the years after that, he experimented with other ways of organising the group. So he came up with more successful strategies. And in the end, even though he loved giving the students choice, he actually found it was better for him to choose the teams himself because they were more effective. And what he would do is work with them and get them to really think about what makes a good team member. So this became a really important part of the process. So even though what you might be seeing when you look at his work is some really incredible, sophisticated literacy work, along with programming, and as a teacher educator, I look and I think, wow, what great literacy work, what amazing maths work they're doing in this. But as well as that, they're learning a lot of skills about group dynamics and about how to work together in a team for quite a long time. So Con has really developed some really interesting approaches in the way that he's doing that. Also, across time, he's made the work itself much more sophisticated. And so you can see in the first years when he was working with us, he was really experimenting. And now the children that you can see talking about their work are very sophisticated in the ways that they've used the technology. The games are sophisticated, the narratives they've created are sophisticated, and all of it has been done with a real feeling for what will make the game successful and what will make other people want to play it, which is incredible really for these kids who are 10 years old to be able to do. So it's really quite remarkable, I think. So one of the schools in our project, North Fitzroy Primary School, are a digital games flagship school, which means that they put together a proposal to the Education Department in Victoria, and they were accepted. And so they've been given resources to really develop their digital games program. And so that's seen them move from just a few teachers using digital games in the classroom to it being something which is incorporated across every subject across the whole of the school. Now there's more done in some year levels than others, but still the school has used it in so many interesting and rich ways. For instance, in the grade 6s, they've been using Minecraft and they've made a whole new world that they escape to explore areas of environmental degradation and to experiment with scientific ideas about how you can make the world greener and how you can run a planet in a much more energy efficient and clean way. And one of the things that I particularly like about that project is that the children themselves are running the project. So they're the ones who are designing the world, and they're in teams, and each team is responsible for making decisions about how a different part of the new world is built. And so those of you who know Minecraft can think about, it's sort of like electronic Lego in a way. So they have to negotiate the space. They have to work out which parts of the city are going to go in which parts of the Minecraft Terra. And then they have to work out what sort of energy they're going to use. They have to come to decisions about how each part of the landscape is used and try and keep the whole thing in balance. So it requires them to do a lot of really, really sophisticated research so that they can put their ideas forward to the other children and try and get them to vote for their idea. And so it's got a lot of social benefits in the way that they're running the game within the school, but it's also got a really high engagement level for the students, because the students themselves really have a sense of ownership and of wanting to take this work forward and trying to get it as polished and professional as they can. And so that's something that I think has been really successful at that school, that whole way that Minecraft has been used so innovatively to teach about environmental education. The whole aim of the Minecraft project was to teach certain concepts about the environment, and so it was a science project. And so that learning naturally sort of shifted across from science into the game world. And because making the Minecraft game itself is relatively easy, like building is easy, and most of the kids already did it outside of school, a lot of time wasn't used in teaching how to do Minecraft. It was mostly using Minecraft to illustrate things that the kids were learning in their own research about the environment. So in a way you can consider it like if you were doing a research project and you were writing it out with paper and pen. In a way, the Minecraft became the tool for showing what everyone had learned. And it was also the site of negotiation, where different groups were competing and negotiating on the space about what would happen. So I found it very interesting to kind of look at the different ways in which children were negotiating within that space and how that worked in terms of how the teachers set it up. In the Serious Play project, what we have are 3 separate areas of investigation. So one area is where we look at texts and think about game as text. So this is thinking about the ways in which games are operating and what's actually happening within the games themselves. So some examples of this are at Q. The students have investigated games and they've looked at what are the values that the games have. How are the games constructed? What are the colours in the games? What are the ways that the game designer makes us feel or experience certain things? So that section of the project is the Games as Text project. There's another section of the project where we're looking at making games and what might students learn from making games and how might game making be incorporated into the curriculum. And the third part of the project has been about serious games. So thinking about games which have been designed to teach particular things. So some examples of this are Statecraft X and the ways in which that was used at Marymount. And that game itself is designed to teach people about civics and citizenship. So those students played the game and it was designed to actually teach it. So that's a different kind of usage for the games than, say, Minecraft, which was a very open-ended game, and the students used that to explore environmental education and some civics and citizenship when they built their own world. So one of the things that I often think about is the ways that games can enable you to learn factual information. And I really see that sometimes games can give us an experience of what if, or what is it like to be. And, you know, in drama education, Dorothy Heathcote describes that as the mantle of the expert. So wearing someone else's clothes, or, you know, often you talk about walking around in someone else's shoes. And I think games have the power to do that very neatly and easily. So for instance, when you play The Sims, you get a really good understanding, even though maybe that's not the object of the game, of what it's like to be a civic engineer. Because a lot of what you're doing when you're building the game is thinking about the relationship between your building, the road, the layout of the street, and getting all of those things to function together. So you're kind of designing your city, and you're designing how people will move around in the city, what's the layout of the city. And so that's enabling you to sort of really immerse yourself in the what if. Like, what if I was a civic engineer and I was designing a city? What would it feel like, and what's important? And so some of the things you're learning when you're doing that aren't necessarily things which are concrete and concretely part of the curriculum, but it's giving you the understanding of the thought processes and the orientation to the world that you would have if you were in that role in the real world. And I think a lot of the uses of the games in the project have really tried to do that kind of thing, give the students experiences of different ways of orientating themselves in the world. And I think that's inherently valuable. A lot of the reasons given for using games in the classroom are about engagement, about engaging students, the students find it interesting, that kind of thing. And from my perspective, I see that as being just the starting point. So I think students can never learn unless they're engaged, and engagement is always something you're driving for. But actually, that's not enough reason on its own to use games. So I think the reason that we use games is that they're such important social, cultural artifacts, and that they're sort of living and breathing texts. And so I would be using games not just because they engage the students, but the reason I think the work is important is because I think they're important to society, and that they're a really big part of society which is just getting bigger and bigger all the time. So as citizens, we need to understand them. We need to understand how we might use them, but we also need to understand the ways in which people interact with them, and what games do and what they might be doing to us, you know, whether it's good or bad. So I think all of those things are really important. It's not just about engagement, but it's about learning about something which is significant to us culturally at this moment in time. One of the greatest outcomes for the teachers in our project has been getting to work with other like-minded teachers. So, you know, a highlight for me of the project has been every time we had a teacher professional learning day, it was a time when they could engage with each other as well as with the project team. And they got to know each other really well through the process. And so teachers went and visited other schools and they got to know each other. And that was a real highlight for me. I loved the way that the teachers visited other schools. They took the ideas back and then they spent time talking with each other about what was happening. And you know, as a teacher, you're really quite located in your own school, so you don't often get opportunities to go to other schools and converse with other teachers about their work and to have a look at the kinds of practices which are happening around you. So one thing the project did was it gave teachers an opportunity to do that, and I think that was very successful. So one of the things that we've been very interested in our work is what's called paratexts. And paratexts are texts which are created around a game. And you see online there are many, many, many kinds of texts that fans make. It's like a type of fan fiction that people will make around games. And often this is a way of students connecting into the game world and the world of games. So In some of the schools, students have made trailers for games. So they may have done a game design and then they may have made a trailer for their imagined game rather than make the actual game. Or they have made something which is a design for a game and then they've written a pitch. And the other way that students have engaged with Paratext is that they've written, or some of them have done things like written critiques of games, or they've written some sort of fan fiction about a game or another level for an already existing game, if that makes sense. So all of those things are different ways that they can engage with it quite successfully in school. And they fit into lots of areas of the curriculum. So if you take a subject like English, there's a lot of activities that you can do in class that are related to gaming, which don't involve people either studying a game or even making a game. There are many ways which teachers can use digital games in English, which move beyond either studying a particular game or making a game. And some successful things that our teachers have done have been things like getting students to write reviews of games, to engage with online ranking systems, and also to write fan fiction for games. So imagine another level of a game and write about what that might be like, or to think about ways in which a game might be turned around and changed. So if you were going to change this game, what would you do to it? So posing the kinds of questions that we typically ask as English teachers, but thinking of the game itself as a text that you might inquire and ask questions of in the same way that you may a literary text. And many games are very literary in quality, in their feeling and in their substance. And so I think it's quite, it's fair enough to use games in this way because they do have those qualities about them. Some of them are very sensual and they use language well, they use colour, they use movement in just the way a finely crafted film would. For me, one of the highlights in the project was the day that the students from Kew went across to visit the students from North Fitzroy. And this was a wonderful day. The teachers had already visited each other, and the teacher from North Fitzroy, Con, and myself had already spent a day in the Kew classroom with the Year 9 games, and we'd been working with them. So then that class came across to Con's class to play and give feedback to the younger children about their games. And it was just the most wonderful experience. It was a lovely afternoon and the students really connected with each other. And the children in Con's class were so grateful and happy for all the wonderful feedback they got from the older students. But by the same token, those students were quite moved about the complexity and the richness of the games that the children had created, because a lot of the games the children had made were as sophisticated as the ones that they had produced themselves. So I think that was a really interesting lesson for them, to think about. And, from my perspective as a secondary teacher, there's usually a bit of a downhill dip in Year 9 as children go through adolescence. But they were really thinking about those kids and how motivated they were, how enthusiastic and on task they were. And they really learnt a lot from that and they felt quite excited about the whole day. It was a really important moment in the project for both of those groups of kids and teachers, because there was something about the interactions between the students which really took both of them somewhere else again. And I think particularly the Year 9 students really understood something quite deep about how the world might be changing, from thinking about what the complexity really of what the younger kids were doing. And they wrote a lot about this to me. They wrote about how they were just enchanted by the work that the children had done, but they were also amazed at the opportunity the children had so young, and that they were so agile with their skills. So they used this kind of language in the way they wrote about it. So I think it was a really meaningful time for them, and it really taught them something about the nature of how technology is changing education. With con students, what they had done was like a complete project around the making of the game. And so it covered a lot of areas of the curriculum. So first of all, the students had to make a team, and Con really worked with them on that. He went through what it is to be a team member and all the various roles that you might take in a game design lab. And he encouraged students to really try and develop skills in all of the areas of game making. So that was the first thing. And then after that, they had to do a design for the game. And so that meant they had to think of their characters, they had to make up a story, and they actually produced a storybook of the game. And then they took the essence of that story and worked out how they could make it into like a mechanical plot. So how they could take features of the game and mechanise, within the game machinery, what was going to happen in the story. And that's a really sophisticated thing to do. So if you think about, these young children really thinking about, okay, now I've written this story, how am I going to make this story come alive in a game and then make that game playable? So I think it was a really challenging task. Then they made their games. They used Scratch, which is a wonderful piece of software, and they made all the games, and the games were all finished, they're all playable. And then Con took it a step further, where he got them to design the box, and they designed all the materials that would go with the CD of the game. So they produced like a complete package. So from the original story, where they did a storyboard and a design, through to the completed narrative, making the game, and then doing the packaging in the box. The whole thing was really beautifully sort of conceived and enacted by the students. And the students were really proud of the work that they had done, and it was quite meaningful to them, because not only did they have a product which captured a lot of deep learning that they had done in the classroom, but it was also something that they could take and they could get other people to play. And so they had become, creators of media as well as just consumers of media. So I think that was partly, some of the success of this, because the product itself was a meaningful product that they could use in the world.